So just imagine sitting in your office break room, right? You're rolling your eyes because Susan, from accounting, didn't refill the coffee pot.
Oh my God, classic Susan.
Literally classic. And you're annoyed, you're tapping your foot, drafting this super passive-aggressive Post-it note in your head.
Like to whoever killed the Dark Rose.
Exactly. But then imagine that 30 minutes later, armed men literally kick down the door, shoot your boss in the head right in front of the vending machine, and days later, you're forced to hold a gun to Susan's head in a tennis stadium.
Just to prove your loyalty to a new regime. I mean, it is fully unhinged.
Completely unhinged. Welcome to the Snark side, Snark Squad. It is Wednesday evening, the wine is officially flowing, and we are, totally locked in tonight.
Oh, we are so locked in. Grab your glasses, babes. Light your most expensive candle.
Seriously, settle into the couch because we have an overwhelming amount of psychological trauma to unpack. And a huge, massive shout out to all of our brand new listeners joining the squad this week. We're so obsessed with you already.
We really are. And to our returning babes, our absolute ride or dies, pour yourselves something strong.
Heavy on the pour.
Very heavy on the pour because, I love you, and we are about to completely spiral tonight. Clink, bestie. Cheers to the squad.
Clink, cheers. And honestly, they're going to need something way stronger than my usual Aperol spritz.
Well, you might need an entire pitcher, maybe a barrel. The psychological warfare we just witnessed requires serious fortification.
Truly. Because, we just watched Season 1, Episode 6 of The Testaments, and I am physically unwell.
You've been pacing the living room for an hour.
I am emotionally compromised. It is giving absolute iconic reality TV drama, but set in a literal dystopian nightmare.
Right. The backstabbing, the shifting alliances, the secret journals.
It's like the Real Housewives of Gilead. The tension is so thick you could cut it with a machete. I just cannot handle the stress of these women constantly plotting against each other while the world literally burns down around them.
It is genuinely wild how quickly this show managed to establish a dynamic that feels so deeply petty and intimately toxic.
Yes.
Despite the fact that the macro stakes are literally life and death. You have these women fighting for basic survival, maneuvering through an apocalyptic wasteland, but they're doing it with the exact same passive-aggressive energy of a corporate HR department.
On a Tuesday afternoon, it is a masterpiece of tension.
It really is.
Yeah.
But it's also just this devastating reflection on how human nature doesn't fundamentally change, right? It just adapts to whatever horrific container you pour it into.
Speaking of human nature and corporate passive aggression, I need to take a quick detour before we get into the show.
Oh no, here we go.
I am fully spiraling today, bestie. I got called a control freak at work today.
Wait, really? By who?
By a grown man. A man who, couldn't organize a PDF if his actual life depended on it.
Oh my God, the audacity.
Right. I'm just sitting there managing timelines, trying to make sure our quarterly project doesn't spontaneously combust and ruin all our lives, and I get labeled a control freak. I was shaking in my ergonomic desk chair. Am I a control freak? Please, look me in the eye and tell me I am just an organized, high-functioning queen who is vibing through life.
Babe, look at me.
I'm looking.
Look me directly in the eyes. I love you with my whole entire heart. I would cross oceans for you.
I sense a butt coming.
But I have the group chat receipts saved to my iCloud, and I will read them into the public record if forced.
Oh, you wouldn't dare.
Need I remind you of the bachelorette trip to Nashville last summer?
That was a highly successful weekend.
You sent out a color-coded, multi-tab Excel spreadsheet with mandatory bathroom break times.
It was for efficiency. We had a tight schedule.
You bolded the font for hydration stations, bestie.
Yeah.
You color-coded the outfits based on the meteorological forecast of the humidity index.
Because frizz is a real threat in the South.
You are not just vibing through life. You are managing the vibe with an iron fist. You are attempting to bend the chaos of the universe to your absolute will.
Okay, first of all, I am feeling incredibly attacked in my own studio right now. Nobody got dehydrated in Nashville.
That is factually true, yes.
Nobody ended up in a rhinestone cowboy boot-related medical emergency, and you are all incredibly welcome for that. The bride had a flawless experience because I foresaw the pitfalls of Lower Broadway and neutralized them.
Okay, commander of the bachelorette party.
I am just trying to maintain order in a chaotic, unpredictable world. Is that a crime? Is it a crime to want to schedule?
It's not a crime under current federal law, no. But it is giving a very specific, intense energy.
Whatever.
Honestly, and I say this with the utmost affection, You micromanaging that group project today is not entirely dissimilar to the psychological impulse of Aunt Lydia picking out that horribly itchy, ugly brown burlap fabric for the ants' uniforms.
Oh my God, I am gagging. How dare you?
It stems from the exact same root desire.
Yeah.
You both love a mandatory dress code, you both love a rigid schedule,
Wow.
and you both firmly believe that if everyone just listened to you, the world would function perfectly.
I am offended, I am wounded, and I am taking a massive, deeply resentful sip of my wine right now.
Cheers to the burlap.
But fine, if I am Aunt Lydia in this friendship dynamic, what exactly does that make you? Because I came over to your apartment yesterday to borrow your steamer, and you literally have a haunted doll sitting on your credenza.
Oh, leave Tanis out of this.
Just sitting there, judging me. Snark Squad, I need you all to know, for my own safety, that my best friend went on a wellness retreat to Mexico and brought back a porcelain doll that is 100% possessed by a furious Victorian ghost.
Her name is Canis. She is an antique, and
Yeah.
she is simply misunderstood by the mainstream.
Misunderstood. She has crazy eyes.
She has a very strong energetic presence, yes. I
Ah.
will admit that. Sometimes the temperature in the living room drops 15 to 20 degrees when you make direct eye contact with her glass eyes.
That is not normal.
Occasionally, my dog refuses to enter the room when Tanis is facing the doorway.
Hmm.
But she adds incredible character to the space.
She adds pure terror to the space. She is not grounding the aesthetic, babe. She is threatening our mortal souls, which is exactly why I have mandated, because I am a control freak, thank you for validating me, our chaotic bestie plan for this coming weekend.
Which I'm fully on board for, by the way.
Good, because we are getting in the car, we are driving to Salem, Massachusetts, we are finding a highly rated, locally verified medium, and we are figuring out what Tanis's unfinished earthly business is before she locks us in your bathroom and sets the apartment on fire.
Honestly, a Salem road trip sounds incredibly chic right now. The autumn leaves, the spooky aesthetic. It's a vibe.
It's a survival mission.
But it does make me wonder, analytically speaking, if you and I were actually living in Salem in the late 1800s, during the absolute peak of the hysteria, what would our actual fates be?
Oh, I would not last a day.
You don't think?
I would be burned at the stake immediately. I wouldn't even make it to a trial. They would see me on my porch mixing an Aperol spritz, adding a little dehydrated orange wheel for a garnish, shaking it over artisanal ice.
Oh, the artisanal ice would definitely be a red flag for the Puritans.
Exactly. The town elders would walk by and be like, she is practicing dark alchemy. She is conjuring spirits with that orange liquid. Burn her right now. I would be a pile of ashes before sundown.
See, I completely disagree. You're giving yourself way too much credit as a magical threat.
Excuse me.
I don't think you'd be burned for witchcraft. I think the reality of our demise would be much more mundane. I think we would both just be permanently exiled from the village for gossiping too loudly at the apothecary.
Wait, you are actually so right.
We would be standing in the town square, throwing absolute devastating shade at Goody Proctor's boring bonnet, critiquing the hemline of her apron.
Oh, did you see what Abigail wore to the Harvest Festival? Disgusting.
Exactly. And the elders would just banish us to the dark woods for disturbing the public peace and undermining the moral fabric of the community with our snark.
Okay, that is extremely valid and incredibly accurate. We would absolutely be categorized as a public nuisance.
100%.
Snark Squad, hit up the comments or the DMs and let us know what your 1800s witch trial fate would be. Get creative with it.
Yes, please. We need to know.
But, as hilarious as it is to joke about surviving historical hysteria, let's pivot. Because we really need to look at the deeply unsettling architecture of complicity in a modern context.
Yes, we do.
We need to talk about episode 6, Stadium. So clink your glasses, babe, because we are wading into the absolute deep end of human trauma tonight.
Clink. And that is exactly the right framing for this conversation.
Yeah.
The architecture of complicity.
It's so dark.
Because what this episode does so brilliantly is it finally pulls back the curtain on the mechanics of a totalitarian takeover. We aren't just seeing the aftermath anymore.
Right, we're seeing the literal beginnings.
We are seeing the exact granular moments where the foundation of a society cracks, shatters, and is replaced by something monstrous. We finally get the backstory we have been craving.
The origin story.
The origin story of Aunt Lydia.
I was literally holding my breath for the entire first 20 minutes of the show. My heart was pounding out of my chest.
It was incredibly tense.
Because the episode opens with a flashback, and it is so jarringly, aggressively normal. We're in a dingy, horribly lit elementary school break room.
The fluorescent lighting was giving me anxiety.
Right, and Lydia, just Plain old cardigan-wearing middle school teacher Lydia is being an absolute cranky nightmare because a coworker didn't refill the coffee pot.
So relatable.
She is fully venting, rolling her eyes, talking about how irresponsible people are, how society is decaying because no one respects shared spaces.
The dramatics.
And the coworker who left the pot empty, the woman she is directing all this venom at, it's Vivian. The one we know in the present day is the terrifying Aunt Vidala.
It is the ultimate universally relatable office pettiness. We have all lived in that exact break room.
Oh, absolutely.
You go for the dark roast at 2 p.m., the carafe is empty, the glass is scorched to the burner, it smells like burnt pennies.
The worst smell.
And you instantly want to write a deeply passive-aggressive Post-it note to the entire staff. It is the height of mundane everyday conflict.
Yeah.
But what is so brilliant and genuinely terrifying about this scene is the juxtaposition. It lulls you into this familiar sense of security. You think, oh, I know this world.
Because we've all been there.
But they are arguing about coffee grounds literally seconds before the world completely irreversibly ends.
Literally seconds, because while Lydia's right in the middle of complaining about Vivian's lack of break room etiquette, Vivian bursts through the door, completely frantic, utterly panicked.
She's just terrified.
She says there are armed men outside the school, and the tension just violently skyrockets. In an instant, you realize the casual chatter we heard earlier, the passing comments about canceled classes and budget issues, weren't just about a snow day.
Or local political dispute.
Right. It was the creeping, silent start of a totalitarian takeover. It was happening right under their noses while they were arguing about caffeine.
And the transition from normalcy to absolute horror happens with such ruthless, calculated efficiency. The armed guards in tactical gear storm the hallway.
Ugh, my stomach dropped.
They don't scream, they don't wildly shoot into the ceiling. They specifically, methodically ask to speak to the only male teacher on the floor, a guy named Keith.
Poor Keith.
Keith steps out into the hallway, probably thinking he's going to negotiate or de-escalate the situation, or just figure out what union rep to call, and they just shoot him in the head, point blank.
I screamed.
Right in front of the door window, where all the women can see him drop.
I physically recoiled on my couch. Because you are lulled into this false sense of security with the coffee pot drama, and you think, okay, it's a hostage situation, they'll negotiate.
Exactly.
And then, bam, a bullet to the brain. The sheer naked panic on the faces of Lydia and Vivian as they realize, oh my God, the rules of reality have just permanently changed.
The social contract is entirely void.
HR is not coming to save you. The police are not coming to save you because the people with the guns are the police now.
It is the terrifying realization that there is no higher authority left to appeal to. From that horrific moment of Keith's execution, the women are immediately stripped of their humanity.
Just so fast.
They are rounded up like cattle. They are marched out of the school, herded onto buses, and taken to a local tennis stadium. And bestie, the visual design, the spatial semiotics of this stadium sequence.
Haunting. Truly.
It is going to genuinely haunt my nightmares for years.
What?
It is a masterclass in visual storytelling.
Same. It is pure, concentrated, suffocating horror. They are herded into this massive concrete and plastic stadium, and the guards are systematically stripping them of absolutely everything that connects them to their past lives.
Their identities, their autonomy.
Yes. The women who will eventually become the aunts are tossing their cell phones, their wedding rings, their purses, their car keys into these massive industrial plastic bins.
The visual of just hundreds of dead disabled iPhones sitting in a trash can, it's chilling.
It's the death of the modern era in a single shot.
It is highly calculated psychological warfare. The confiscation of property isn't just about security. It is about the systematic dismantling of the individual self.
Totally.
A guard even lies to them as they throw their things away, saying in this calm, bureaucratic voice, "You'll get your belongings back after processing."
After processing, the gaslighting.
But you look at the scale of those bins, the sheer crushing volume of confiscated lives, and you know instantly that the world they came from is dead. There is no after processing.
None.
They're shoved onto these cold, hard plastic bleachers, and they sit there for days. No information, no clear directive, just endless, agonizing waiting.
And surviving on literally nothing, they are passing around these tiny, pathetic bottles of water and single, sad slices of white bread. I was spiraling just thinking about the physical toll on the human body.
It's basically starvation.
Women are having screaming, violently sobbing nightmares right there in their seats. They're being forced to pee right there in the stands, squatting between the plastic chairs because the guards won't let them move to the bathrooms.
The loss of basic human dignity is so rapid, so absolute, and so intensely humiliating. You go from a respected teacher to an animal in a cage in a matter of hours.
And that profound loss of dignity is punctuated by sudden, extreme theatrical violence. They are sitting there in the stands, starving, terrified, smelling their own waste, and down below them on the tennis court.
Center court, where you used to watch Serena Williams play.
Yes, the regime is conducting public executions. They are making a grotesque spectacle of murder. They are executing people they deem sinners right on the clay.
It was sickening to watch. It was a complete sensory overload. They executed Susan, a pregnant woman, a woman with a visible baby bump.
And they executed her just because she was unmarried. And then they executed a woman simply for wearing jorts?
Jorts, babe. Denim cutoffs. I was losing my mind at the television.
The detail of the jorts is actually profoundly poignant if we look at it from an analytical, socio-political perspective.
I mean, executed for denim, it's insane. It seems almost absurd at first glance, right? But it highlights the extreme, unforgiving, puritanical shift of the new regime. You have to understand what jorts represent semiotically.
Okay, Professor, break it down.
They represent casualness, modernity, comfort, and most importantly, a rejection of hyper-modest, restrictive gender norms. By executing a woman for her clothing choices, the regime is sending a crystal-clear, terrifying message to every woman in those bleachers.
That the old rules don't apply anymore.
Exactly. Any adherence to the old world's freedom, no matter how small, mundane, or seemingly harmless, is a lethal offense. The old rules is dead, and if you cling to it, you die with it.
God, it makes Lydia's later realization so deeply twisted. When she looks back at her old life, at the coffee pots and the comfortable clothes and the freedom to complain, and she somehow concludes that we had all become entitled brats.
Such a dark cognitive leap.
Like, yes, Lydia, we like comfort. We like not being executed in a tennis stadium for wearing shorts. But the sheer trauma of the stadium just breaks her brain. It completely reshapes her psychological framework so she can justify the abuse she is enduring.
Exactly. It is a textbook severe trauma response. She has to twist the narrative to make it her own fault, because if it's her fault that society was entitled, then there is a logical reason for the punishment.
It makes sense in a sick way.
It gives her a false sense of control in a completely uncontrollable, chaotic environment. And this psychological break, this desperate need for control, brings us to the absolute undeniable turning point of the entire episode.
The interrogation.
The interrogation with Commander Jed.
Okay, Snark Squad, pause your lives and listen to me, because this is where the dynamic of the entire show fundamentally shifts. This is the crucible.
Everything changes here.
Lydia is pulled out of the squalor of the stadium, dragged out of the bleachers, and brought into the clean, quiet bowels of the arena to sit across a folding table from Commander Jed. And Jed is just sitting there,
sipping his perfectly clean water.
He is acting like he is casually reviewing resumes for a mid-level marketing position at a tech startup while he holds her literal, fragile life in his manicured hands.
He's the architect of this nightmare, and he plays his cards with terrifying surgical precision. He doesn't yell. He doesn't threaten her with a weapon.
No, he's so quiet.
He simply opens a manila folder, looks at her file, and drops an atomic bomb. He knows her deepest, most guarded secret. He knows she is 58 years old. He knows she is unmarried. And he knows that she had an abortion in her younger years.
And we have to be very clear about how this functions in the plot, right?
Yeah.
In the context of this new, horrific Gilead reality, that past medical procedure, something that was entirely legal and normal in the world she lived in, is now retroactively punishable by death.
The regime has literally rewritten the laws of the past to trap women in the present.
Exactly. It is a narrative catalyst that completely definitively backs Lydia into an inescapable corner. She has zero leverage. She is looking straight down the barrel of an execution order, and she knows it.
But this is where we see the absolute terrifying brilliance of Lydia Clements.
Oh, she is a mastermind.
She doesn't beg for her life. She doesn't collapse into a puddle of tears. She doesn't deny it. She pivots. She observes Judd, and she reads his ego perfectly.
She sees right through him.
She realizes a fundamental truth about these men. The architects of Gilead are utterly obsessed with absolute power, but they are deeply, fundamentally lazy.
So lazy.
They don't actually want to deal with the messy, exhausting day-to-day logistics of policing and controlling millions of angry, terrified women.
Yes. She leans in and she basically pitches him a business model. She says, look, you are a very important man. You are doing God's work. You are building a nation. You do not have the time or the energy to be micromanaging the female sphere.
Leave that to us.
The women will rebel if men try to break them. But if you let women teach women, if you let us do the dirty work, we can police our own kind. We can enforce your rules so you can focus on the big picture.
It's diabolical.
She strokes his ego so masterfully, pitching this idea of the ants as a specialized enforcer class. She essentially invents her own horrific job description right there at the folding table, purely to save her own life.
It is a breathtaking masterclass in survival through manipulation. But Commander Judd is not a fool. He is a sociopath, but he is highly intelligent.
He knows what she's doing.
He sees exactly what she's doing. He sees the ambition, and he decides to test just how far her newly pledged loyalty actually goes. He stands up. He gives her a loaded gun.
Ugh, my stomach was in knots.
And he tells her she needs to prove definitively that she is with them. He walks her out of the locker room, back out onto that glaringly bright tennis court, toward a lineup of blindfolded women kneeling on the clay.
I was literally pausing the TV. I was pacing my living room, clutching my wine glass like a lifeline, because she walks up to the line, her hands are shaking, she is holding this heavy black gun.
The tension was unbearable.
And the guard roughly pulls the blindfold off the woman she's supposed to execute. And it's Vivian, her coworker, the woman she was just complaining about the coffee pot with days ago, the woman who hid with her in the break room.
The visual of Vivian looking up at Lydia, tears streaming through the dirt on her face, her eyes wide with terror, silently begging for her life. It is completely gut-wrenching.
I was crying.
And the camera lingers on Lydia's face. You see the frantic, terrifying internal calculus happening behind her eyes. The desperate, horrific realization that if she doesn't pull this trigger, the guards will simply shoot them both.
And her pitch to Judd meant nothing.
Precisely.
And then the gasp heard round the entire world. Snark Squad, Lydia actually pulls the trigger.
She actually does it.
She doesn't drop the gun, she doesn't turn it on the guard, she squeezes her eyes shut and she fires at her friend's head. To save herself, she commits to murdering her coworker in cold blood. But, click.
The gun is empty.
The gun is empty. Bestie! I screamed so loud my neighbor knocked on the wall. The sheer devastation of that sound. The heavy, metallic click echoing across the stadium.
It was so loud in that silence.
It wasn't about killing Vivian. It was about breaking Lydia. It was Commander Judd systematically proving that he owns her absolute soul now.
It is the ultimate irreversible psychological break. Judd wasn't testing if she was capable of murder. He was testing if she would completely, totally surrender her humanity to the regime.
And she proved she would.
And by pulling that trigger, she proved that she would. But think about the catastrophic, decades-long fallout of that single moment. This is the origin story of Aunt Vidala's absolute, burning, pathological hatred for Aunt Lydia in the present day.
Could you even imagine? Just put yourself in Vivian's shoes for 1 second. You are kneeling in the dirt. You are preparing to die. Your coworker, your supposed friend from the break room, points a gun directly at your face and pulls the trigger to save her own skin.
And then you survive.
And you survive. And you are forced by the regime to spend the next 20 years of your life working directly underneath the woman who tried to blow your brains out.
It's wild.
No wonder Aunt Vidala is always throwing absolute shade in the faculty meetings. She is staring into the eyes of her attempted murderer every single day over Earl Grey tea.
It adds an entirely new, incredibly toxic, deeply tragic layer to their dynamic. It is the most extreme, hostile work environment imaginable.
To put it mildly.
You have to bow your head and say, "Blessed be the fruit," to the woman who sold your life out for a warm meal and a position of authority. And this brings us to the physical manifestation of that trauma.
Yes, because after Lydia passes this twisted test, Judd actually lets her design the uniform for her new class of aunts. And she specifically deliberately chooses that heavy, ugly, incredibly itchy brown burlap material.
It's so hideous.
Because, as she says in her haunting voiceover, she wants to remind them all that they become entitled brats in the old world. She is intentionally weaponizing physical discomfort.
It's a daily punishment.
She wants them to suffer just a little bit every single second of every single day so they never, ever forget the stakes of the world they live in.
It is institutionalized self-flagellation applied to an entire class of women. She hates herself so deeply for what she did in that stadium, for pulling that trigger, and because she cannot process that guilt, she projects that hatred onto the uniforms.
She wraps them all in her own psychological torture.
Exactly. It is fascinating and completely repulsive all at once.
Mm.
And this entire system of weaponizing discomfort brings us perfectly to how they enforce it on the next generation. Let's pivot from the apocalyptic trauma of the past to the modern-day Mean Girls witch hunt of Gilead, present day.
Oh, the present day is a whole different flavor of nightmare. It is contender day at the school.
The worst day of the year.
The aunts are sitting around their massive, polished mahogany table, drinking their little teas and deciding which teenage girls are going to be forced to marry which crusty, ancient, decaying commanders. It is so deeply disturbing to watch women trade the lives of young girls like baseball cards.
And this is where we see Aunt Vidala trying to exact her petty, long-game revenge against Lydia. They're discussing the future of Becca. Now, we know Becca is struggling deeply with the reality of her impending marriage.
She's terrified.
And Vidala deliberately, maliciously suggests pairing Becca with Commander Maddox.
Commander Maddox, the absolute creep. The monster who cornered Becca at the school ball, got her drunk on smuggled alcohol, and clearly has predatory intentions.
Vidala knows exactly what she is doing.
She is trying to punish Becca to spite Lydia, and by extension, challenge Lydia's absolute authority at the table. It is a chess move using a teenager's life, but Lydia, thank God, shuts it down immediately.
She wields her power and vetoes it.
She's not letting that happen to her favorite pupil.
It is a vicious power struggle played out over the bodies and futures of these girls. But the real emotional core of Contender Day revolves around Agnes.
Oh, sweet Agnes.
Agnes is completely spiraling because she is in love with Garth, and she confesses this love to Becca in the gym in this incredibly tense, hushed conversation.
Oh, this scene completely broke me. Agnes is whispering, "I'm in love," and it's horrible. Because in Gilead, romantic love isn't just silly, it is a massive, lethal liability. It makes you reckless.
That gets you killed.
But the tragic, twisting irony here, the thing that had me weeping into my wine glass, is that Agnes is confessing her love for a boy to Becca, and Becca is secretly, desperately in love with Agnes.
The longing in Becca's eyes.
You can see the absolute heartbreak crashing over Becca's face, but she physically swallows it down to comfort her friend. It is so devastating. The queer erasure in Gilead is so profound that Becca can't even voice her pain.
It is a phenomenal piece of subtle acting. The silent agony of unrequited, forbidden love in a world that would execute you for expressing it.
It's so sad.
And Agnes, fueled by this desperate, blinding teenage hope, actually goes to Aunt Lydia's office. She stands in front of the most terrifying woman in the entire country, and she asks if Garth, who is just a lowly guardian, not a commander, can be put on her eligible suitor list.
Which is an insane risk. You do not walk up to the principal of a dystopian death school and ask for a favor for your high school crush. That is a fast track to the colonies.
It's incredibly dangerous.
The gasp moment of the present day, Lydia actually softens. The Iron Maiden cracks. She looks at Agnes, this girl she clearly has a complicated maternal affection for, and she actually considers it, and she makes it happen. She brings Garth's name to the committee and manipulates the board into accepting him.
It is a crucial narrative development because it shows that Lydia's armor has cracks. Despite the itchy burlap, despite the unimaginable trauma of the stadium, there is still a tiny sliver of human empathy buried deep down. But it is exclusively reserved for the girls she considers hers.
Her girls.
She views Agnes as her legacy.
But her empathy is highly selective, because the school is still fundamentally a house of horrors. While Lydia is showing a tiny bit of grace behind closed doors, Vidala is out in the hallways enforcing brutal, draconian discipline.
Vidala is a menace.
Hulda finally gets her period, which, in the twisted logic of Gilead, means she is officially a woman and immediately placed on the marriage market. Vidala checks her underwear, confirms the blood, and then immediately weaponizes that milestone.
Right, Vidala forces Hulda to hold down her best friend Shu's hands, while Shu is violently whipped with a cane for slapping Jehoshiba at the ball earlier in the season.
The girl-on-girl violence forced by the aunts is so deeply sinister. They are literally making these young girls complicit in the physical torture of their own best friends.
It's a systemic cycle.
It's the exact same psychological tactic Commander Judd used on Lydia in the stadium with Vivian. Vidala learned the psychology of abuse from her own trauma, and now she is intentionally passing it down to the next generation. It is a terrifying message. You want to be a woman in Gilead, Hulda. Here's what it costs. You will betray the people you love.
Exactly. Trauma begets trauma. Hurt people, hurt people. The cycle is completely flawlessly self-sustaining at this point. The regime doesn't even need to intervene anymore. The women are policing themselves.
It's sickening.
And speaking of the regime's architects, we get a fascinating critical check-in with Commander Judd in the present day. His young wife, Penny, miscarries for the third time. He is visibly distressed. He comes to the school. His powerful facade is slipping, and Lydia steps in to comfort him.
She goes right back into that stadium survival manipulation mode. She speaks to him so softly, telling him to rest his brilliant mind, offering to procure a fertile handmaid for him behind the scenes to fix his domestic problem.
She's playing him again.
She is massaging his ego, making herself completely indispensable again, and it works perfectly. He looks at her, the woman who runs his torture school, and calls her above rubies, which is such a gross, patronizing, patriarchal compliment. But in Lydia's economy, it is pure gold. She's securing her bag and solidifying her power base.
But we have to remember why this miscarriage matters so much on a macro level, because it explains Lydia's urgency. Gilead's entire justification for its atrocities, the executions, the handmaids, the loss of freedom, is that they are solving the global fertility crisis caused by pollution. They promised God would bless them with children if they followed these horrific rules.
The big lie.
If high-ranking commanders' wives are still miscarrying at this rate, it proves the regime's core promise is a complete lie. The mandate of heaven is broken. Lydia stepping in isn't just about comforting an old friend. She is plugging a massive, dangerous leak in the regime's propaganda before it sinks the entire ship.
Wow, that is such a brilliant point. She is managing the PR of the apocalypse.
Basically, yeah.
But she isn't the only aunt with massive secrets. We get a huge reveal from Aunt Esty. Oh my gosh, Aunt Esty.
It's a quiet one.
The one with the slightly unhinged crazy eyes who is always lurking in the background of the faculty meetings. She's talking to Daisy and she casually drops the bomb that she was the original Pearl Girl. Meaning she wasn't forced into Gilead during the coup. She joined willingly years later.
The absolute shade of it all.
She crossed the border, looked at a society that hangs people for wearing jorts and said, "Sign me up, here is my resume."
Who volunteers for a totalitarian regime. It completely reframes Este's entire character arc. She isn't a victim of circumstance like Lydia or Vidala who are forced at gunpoint. She is an ideological fanatic.
She's a true believer.
And that makes her arguably the most dangerous person in the entire building, because she isn't acting out of survival instinct. She is acting out of genuine, terrifying conviction.
It is terrifying. It is giving massive cult energy, but not as terrifying as the final scene of the episode. Snark Squad, if you were not screaming at your television screen, check your pulse immediately.
The safe.
Lydia is alone in her dimly lit office. She locks the heavy wooden door. She moves a beautiful tapestry on the wall, revealing a hidden, heavy steel safe. She opens the safe, and she pulls out this massive, thick, heavily bound journal.
The Gilead burn book.
It is literally a burn book. Aunt Lydia is Regina George, keeping a meticulous, detailed record of every single crime, every hypocritical action, every abuse of power, every secret sin committed by the weak men who run Gilead.
The voiceover reveals her internal monologue, and it is a paradigm shift for the audience.
It changes everything.
She is documenting everything. She is gathering receipts. She explicitly says she is preparing for the day they fall. It radically changes our understanding of her entire long game. She isn't just a compliant enforcer. She is a dormant virus inside the system.
Yes, she is secretly plotting. It's exactly like keeping a highly detailed, heavily encrypted burn book on your toxic CEO. Just sitting at your desk every day, taking notes, smiling at meetings, waiting for the day HR or the feds finally kick the doors down so you can hand over the flash drive and watch them burn.
She is stockpiling ammunition.
It is a brilliant strategic move. But let's break this down further, because this episode gives us so much to analyze about the structures of power and female complicity. Let's move into our first segment of the night. Cult or book club?
I live for this segment.
Okay, Snark Squad. Here's the prompt for tonight. Look at the ants sitting around that grand mahogany table, sipping their green tea, matching bloodlines, and deciding the permanent fates of these teenage girls. Is this highly organized, systemic, bureaucratic control? Or is it just intense, toxic groupthink masquerading as authority? What are you feeling, babe?
Well, if we look at the logistics of Contender Day, it is chillingly systematic. It is pure bureaucracy. They're actively cross-referencing bloodlines to avoid inbreeding, which shows a clinical, detached view of the female population as mere livestock.
So detached.
They are assigning suitors not based on compatibility, but based on political favors, military deployments, and rank within the regime. It is a highly calculated, heavily bureaucratized cult masquerading as a stuffy school faculty meeting. They have codified oppression into paperwork.
See, you take the highly analytical route, but emotionally, from a purely vibe-based perspective. To me, it feels like a deeply twisted sorority rush.
I can see that.
You know, when you sit in the sorority house basement at 2 a.m., looking at photos of the freshmen, deciding who gets a bid based on entirely arbitrary rules, except in this dystopian version, the bid is a lifetime prison sentence of forced marriage to an ancient commander.
Dark.
It's like a suburban book club where the book is just ruining teenagers' lives over Earl Grey tea. It feels so insular and catty.
I mean, you're not wrong about the sorority rush energy, the secrecy, the exclusivity, the arbitrary rules of social standing. And if we connect this to the Pearl Girl program, especially with Aunt Esty revealing she volunteered, it heavily leans into cult territory. Specifically, it feels like a dystopian MLM, a multi-level marketing scheme. Think about how MLMs work.
Oh my gosh, yes. Like the girls from high school selling essential oils on Facebook?
Exactly. MLMs prey on vulnerable women seeking community and financial independence. They offer them a shiny title, a sense of superiority, and a starter kit. But the only way to maintain your status, the only way to actually survive in the structure, is to aggressively recruit more victims into your downline.
Hey, girly, want to join Gilead?
You get this cute pearl necklace, eternal salvation, and all you have to do is surrender your human rights. Este is essentially a diamond-level aunt who recruited her entire downline by crossing the border.
Just recruit 3 friends to cross the border, sell them on the modesty skirts, and you achieve platinum Pearl Girl status. It is so dark, but the analogy works perfectly. But you're right, the systemic control is undeniable. Which leads us perfectly into segment 2, survival instinct or main character syndrome.
A crucial distinction in any dystopian narrative. We're going to break down key character decisions from this episode and debate. Was the action a smart, necessary survival move based on the reality of their situation, or was it delusional, reckless main character energy?
Okay, I will start us off. Agnes going to Aunt Lydia's office, completely unprompted, to ask her to bend the rigid matchmaking rules of a totalitarian regime so her crush, Garth, can be put on the eligible husband list.
Absolute unadulterated main character syndrome.
Oh, really?
I am sorry, but who does she actually think she is? You are living in a regime that publicly executes people for wearing denim, and you walk up to the terrifying headmistress, the woman who literally hands out physical torture like candy, and say, "Excuse me, Aunt Lydia, can you tweak the matchmaking algorithm so I can marry the cute boy from the gym?"
She was just shooting her shot.
It is wildly delusional. She is surviving purely on plot armor and Aunt Lydia's secret, inexplicable soft spot for her lineage.
I completely disagree. You were looking at this like a math problem, but she is a teenage girl. I am fiercely defending Agnes here. She isn't operating on plot armor. She is operating on desperation.
Desperation doesn't make it smart.
When you are backed into a corner and told you have to marry a decaying old man, asking the principal for a favor is literally your only play. Is it reckless? Yes. But it's not main character syndrome to want to choose who you spend the rest of your life with. You can't blame her for hoping.
I can absolutely blame her for a lack of risk assessment.
Mhm.
Let me break down why it's incredibly dangerous. If Lydia is having a bad day, if Lydia decides she needs to make an example out of someone, Agnes is instantly sent to the colonies to shovel radioactive waste until their teeth fall out.
Well,
The mathematical risk of asking that question is a 99% chance of death for a 1% chance of a slightly better husband. That is main character syndrome.
okay, fine. Mathematically, it was a terrible risk. I concede the math, but I respect the hustle. If you're going to be forced into marriage, you might as well shoot your shot. Okay, next one. Aunt Lydia pulling the trigger on Vivian in the stadium.
I will take this one from a purely analytical standpoint as well. That is pure, raw, terrifying survival instinct.
But she had a choice. She could have turned the gun on Judd. She could have refused.
No, she absolutely did not have a choice, and here's why. Commander Judd backed her into an inescapable corner. He had her file. He knew about the abortion. He explicitly told her that her life depended on proving her loyalty in that exact moment.
I just think that...
If she hesitates, if she refuses, or if she tries to play hero and turn the gun on the guards, she is shot dead in the dirt next to Vivian within 2 seconds. And then Vivian is shot anyway, and the regime rolls on without her. It was ruthless, it was deeply traumatizing, but it was the only mathematical equation that resulted in her continuing to breathe.
It is the darkest survival instinct possible, but when you lay it out like that, you can't deny the logic. If it's me or you kneeling in that dirt, bestie, I'm sorry, but I'm pulling the trigger.
I would hope so.
I will cry about it later in my itchy burlap dress. I will pay for your therapy, but I am surviving. Okay, last one for this segment. Shu slapping Jehoshba at the ball, which resulted in her getting her hands violently whipped this episode.
Main character syndrome behavior. Fully.
So reckless. You are in Gilead. You are surrounded by armed guards with assault rifles and terrifying ants with cattle prods. You cannot just be out here slapping girls across the face like you are filming a Real Housewives reunion in the Hamptons.
I'm going to flip a table in Gilead. No.
Stop instigating physical altercations in public.
It is a complete lack of situational awareness. She let her temper override her survival instinct, and she paid a brutal physical price for it. In Gilead, you have to play the long game. You cannot just react emotionally to every slight. Which brings us to a very uncomfortable, highly personal question, segment 3. If we were there.
Oh boy, I am sweating just thinking about this.
We sit here in our comfortable studio, drinking wine, judging these characters, snarking on their decisions. But looking at what Lydia did to survive the stadium makes you genuinely wonder what we would actually do.
I know.
Insert ourselves into that tennis stadium. We are stripped of our phones. We are sitting on the bleachers, smelling fear, watching the executions unfold on center court. What is your realistic, honest survival strategy?
Snark Squad, I am going to be so deeply honest and messy with you right now. I would not make it. I would absolutely not survive the stadium.
You don't think you'd rally?
I would probably pass out from sheer panic within the first 2 hours. Or worse, my complete lack of an internal monologue would get me killed. I would be complaining out loud about the lack of snacks. I would be asking the heavily armed guards if they had a gluten-free option for the sad white bread, or if they had any sparkling water, and they would just drag me down to center court and take me out immediately. I have zero poker face. I would be a day one casualty.
I genuinely appreciate your honesty because I agree your lack of a filter would be a massive liability.
Thanks. What about you?
Because, conversely, I know exactly what my strategy would be, and it is deeply morally shameful. I would instantly, and I mean within the first hour, start kissing up to the guards.
Oh my God, you would.
I would lean over the plastic bleachers and be like, "Excuse me, sir, with tactical gear, the logistics of this holding area are a bit chaotic. The water distribution is inefficient. Do you need an event coordinator?"
I have an Excel spreadsheet.
I have a pen in my pocket. I can organize a queuing system for the rations. I can streamline your operation. I would bureaucratize my way into a middle management position just to get out of the bleachers.
You absolutely would. You would literally become middle management for the apocalypse. You'd be color coding the execution schedules. It's like surviving that stadium is basically like surviving the worst, longest, most poorly planned music festival of your life.
Like Fire Festival.
Like Fire Festival on steroids, but with actual lethal stakes. You either die of dehydration waiting for a cheese sandwich, or you become part of the event staff handing out the cheese sandwiches to save yourself.
Exactly. You either complain about the cheese sandwiches until they execute you for insubordination, or you grab a clipboard and start managing the cheese sandwich supply chain. It is a bleak, devastating reality of how easily humans compromise their morals for comfort and safety.
It's so true.
But the ones who ultimately survive long-term aren't always the loudest complainers or the most obvious volunteers, which leads us perfectly into our final segment of the night, silent but deadly.
Yes. In a world full of screaming guards, blaring alarms, and public executions, we need to call out the quietest but most incredibly dangerous characters or moments from this episode, the things that absolutely creep up on you and do the most damage.
I will start us off, and I think this is the most profound, devastating moment of the entire hour, if not the season. The empty gun. It was the loudest silence in the entire show.
Chills. I have full-body chills just remembering it.
The physical sound of the trigger clicking on an empty chamber.
Yeah.
There was no explosion, there was no bullet, there was no physical death on the clay court.
And someone died.
But that silence was a deadly psychological bullet that permanently murdered Lydia and Vivian's friendship, and more importantly, it murdered Lydia's past self. It was a completely silent action that dealt fatal, lifelong psychological damage to everyone involved.
That is so profoundly true. The violence of that moment wasn't physical, it was entirely psychological, and it was permanent. Okay, my silent but deadly goes to the man who orchestrated that exact moment, Commander Judd.
An excellent, terrifying choice.
Because he doesn't scream. He doesn't yell. He doesn't hold the gun himself. He doesn't get his hands dirty. He sits in that folding chair in the stadium locker room, sipping bottled water, speaking in this incredibly calm, soft, almost charming fatherly voice.
It's so unsettling.
But his soft-spoken exterior completely masks the mind of an absolute monster. He is the architect of a stadium death camp. The scariest men in history don't yell Snark Squad. They sit quietly at polished desks, they write memos, and they delegate the horrific violence to women.
Yeah. He weaponizes bureaucracy. He is the walking definition of the banality of evil. He destroys lives with the stroke of a pen. And to round out our silent but deadly list, we have to talk about Anastasia again.
The lurking, terrifying Pearl Girl.
She is so incredibly quiet. She rarely speaks up at the AMP meetings. She doesn't demand attention. She just hovers in the background near the curtains with those intense, unblinking eyes taking everything in.
Just watching.
But revealing that she volunteered for this.
Yeah.
That she willfully crossed the border to enforce this misery on other women. She is quietly lurking, holding on to a fanatical devotion that you never ever saw coming. She is a true believer hiding in plain sight among desperate survivors, and that makes her incredibly dangerous because she cannot be reasoned with.
It makes me sick to my stomach just thinking about what she is actually capable of, because she actually wants to be there. She enjoys the control.
Snark Squad, I am officially spiraling again.
Deep breaths, bestie.
My wine glass is empty, my nerves are completely shot, and I have so many chaotic thoughts swirling in my head about where tonight's spiral is going.
It is a massive amount of process. The implications of this episode are absolutely foundational for the rest of the season. They have set up so many dominoes.
Truly. Like, wrap-up time. What is actually going to happen next week? Is Agnes actually going to get Garth? Or is Vidala going to sabotage it with her petty little file delivery to spite Lydia?
Vidala is definitely going to plot something. Will Becca finally snap under the crushing pressure of her unrequited secret love for Agnes? And most importantly, the highest stakes imaginable. Will Aunt Lydia's burn book get discovered before she can hand it over to the Mayday Resistance?
If Commander Judd finds that safe behind the tapestry, it is literally game over for everyone at that school.
The tension is only going to escalate exponentially from here. They have laid the incredibly intricate groundwork for a massive, catastrophic implosion.
I cannot wait. And also, I am deeply terrified for my own blood pressure.
Same. Snark Squad, thank you so much for hanging out, drinking wine, and spiraling with us tonight. You guys are the absolute best, and we love this community so much.
We truly love analyzing this madness with you every week. Please remember to share tonight's discussion with your reality TV-loving, dystopian-obsessed besties. Hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you use so you never miss a weekly spiral.
Yes. And do not forget to slide into our DMs or leave a comment with your own petty workplace drama receipts, or your detailed 1800s witch trial fates, or honestly, if anyone has any verified, actionable tips on how to properly cleanse a modern apartment of a haunted Victorian doll named Tanis, my DMs are wide open. Please help me before she locks me in the pantry.
Candace is fine. She just needs boundaries. But before we go, we want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over until we see you next week. Building on Aunt Lydia's massive hidden burn book.
Oh, this is a good one. Snark Squad, listen up. If you were trapped in a dystopian regime and you had to keep a secret physical journal of the wildest, most toxic things you've witnessed just to secure your own survival and eventual revenge, where exactly would you hide it in your house, and who would be the very first person on page 1?
Think about it. We all have a page 1.
Keep those receipts safe, babes. Stay witchy, stay chaotic, and we will see you on the Snark side.